Hello, my name is Robert M. Ross, and I want to welcome you back to the Common Sense Lifestyle, where we take some psychological concepts and kind of distill them down into some simple things that you can use to improve your life. Before we get started, and before we get into anything too complex, I want to let you know something rather important, kind of my disclaimer that I put in every one of my videos. This is not a therapy session. I am not your therapist. Nothing in this video can be considered to be mental health treatment. All the information in here is for informational purposes. It is not designed to diagnose or treat any kind of condition of any kind. If you do need a therapist, I would encourage you to find one in your local area. Look in for your local insurance company, find out who's in your network. Check with Psychology Today, and you can search for a variety of different clinicians in your area based on your zip code. That out of the way. In my last video, I discussed how men can be in abusive relationships. And in this video, I'm going to discuss how to identify and avoid abusers by learning the red flags that identify a potential abuser before you get into the relationship, or at least before you get too far into the relationship. After all, the logic would say if you are in a bad relationship, it's really kind of hard to get out of a bad relationship. So wouldn't it be easier to learn to recognize the warning signs of a bad relationship and not get into it in the first place? So topic for today, recognizing the red flags, avoid the bad relationship to begin with so you don't get into it. So there's an idea in psychology that suggests that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Now, that's not 1,000% complete, total, 1,000% of the time, but for the most part, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Liars lie, cheaters cheat, abusers abuse. And unless something really radical comes along and changes in someone's life, whether they make a decision to change their lives themselves or something happens in their lives that prompts them to change, people will continue to do what they always do. So keeping that in mind, that's our core concept for today. Let's dig into a few things. I'd like to introduce you to a person that I've never actually met, but I'm a fan of their work. His name is Joseph Carver. He's a PhD psychologist. He is now unfortunately retired. Well, actually, fortunately retired. Good for him that he's retired. I'm going to give a link to his website down below in the description. But he did me a great favor. He wrote an article, a little kind of handout called The Loser, Warning Signs You're Dating a Loser. And I found this online as I was searching for something else, actually. I found this, goodness gracious, probably around 2004, 2005, somewhere in that neighborhood. And he freely gave permission for this to be distributed. He put no kind of copyright on it. He only wanted, I give him credit for it because he did write it, but he didn't ask for anything for it, and he allows it to be freely distributed. So since then, I've literally handed out hundreds of copies of this handout because I think it's really accurate and very useful. Because what this handout does is it allows people to understand and recognize the potential red flags of an abusive relationship, again, before you get too far into it and you're in the situation that I discussed in the last video. So here are some of the red flags that Dr. Carver identified in the now infamous loser handout. Number one red flag, rough treatment. The loser will hurt you on purpose. If he or she hits you, twists your arm, pulls your hair, kicks you, shoves you, breaks your personal property even once, I can't stress this enough, even once, you drop them immediately. You walk off the lot. You are gone. You are done. You drop one of those smoke pellets like a ninja does and you disappear. Now, female losers are going to be different than kind of male losers, as Dr. Carver will put it. Male losers will maybe start by punching objects or destroying objects close to you, or punch the wall real close to you to kind of intimidate you. Female losers will slap, kick, punch guys when they're upset. Don't tolerate that, because if they're doing that early on in a relationship, it's going to get worse later. So don't tolerate that, not even once. Any physical violence, boom, you are gone. It is over. Finito. There's no excuses. There's no tolerance. There's no nothing. Violence is a game ender from day one. So please don't underestimate that. Number 2 red flag, quick attachment and expression. Losers have very shallow emotions and connections with people. They will get attached really, really quickly to you. They're going to proclaim their love for you really, really fast. If you have a person that they're saying, I love you, right after you meet or right after you start dating, massive, massive red flag. When they say they want to get married after a couple weeks, massive, massive red flag. People that get attached that quickly can also get unattached just as quickly, by the way. When someone gets attached that quickly, they're emotionally immature, they're not emotionally complete, they're not feeling self-sufficient in themselves, they're attaching all their emotional needs onto you, and that's going to turn into a furball at some point. Trust me on this. It's a massive red flag. You might want to consider backing off for a person in that situation. Frightening temper. A loser has scary temper. They will snap over the minimal things. If someone cuts them off in traffic, they're going to lose it. If a waiter or waitress gets an order wrong in the restaurant, and we'll get to that one a little bit later, the waitress test is a little bit later, they will snap, they will yell, they will scream. You will be exposed to what Dr. Carver refers to as witnessed violence. You will see them destroy things, fight other people, yell, scream. And this also serves to intimidate you. They're doing this to let you know that one day this can be you if you do them wrong. If you don't listen to what they say, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, one day this violence will be against you. And trust me, if they're violent towards other people, one day the violence will be directed against you. Don't underestimate this. Once again, massive red flag. And if you see it early in the relationship, guaranteed it will one day be directed towards you. Killing your self-confidence is number 4. The loser will put you down a lot. They will correct the slightest mistake. They will make you feel unguarded, unintelligent, and leave you with the feeling that you're always doing something wrong. They'll tell you you're too fat, too unattractive, you don't talk correctly, or you don't look well. And this is meant to gradually chip away at your self-confidence and your self-esteem. And they'll do it to make it look like you deserve it. Basically, this is the beginning stages of wearing away at your self-esteem so you won't try to leave. Remember, abusive relationships are always about control. And usually people in abusive relationships are usually trying to keep you from leaving because they have a perceived sense of being abandoned. They hate being abandoned. They fear being abandoned. So they will do anything to keep you there. And this is the first step of wearing you down. Number 5 follows number 4, cutting off your support, your friends, your family, anyone who might notice that this person is mistreating you, the loser is mistreating you. Anyone, they need to break you away from them. So they're going to tell you that, oh, they don't understand our special relationship. They don't understand how we work. They're really kind of against us, or, oh, your same-sex best friend, they hit on me. They're flirting with me. I think they're jealous of us. They're going to try to separate you from friends and family members that are potential threats to this abusive, controlling relationship. So they're going to try to get you separated. And again, as I talked about in the last video, they're going to try to get you to move away from family. They're going to try to separate you from friends. I know guys that aren't allowed to have friends. They're completely controlled. Their social medias are controlled, everything like that. So if they start to try to just mildly at first, subtly at first, try to separate you from people, it's a red flag, big red flag. Number 6 is the mean and sweet cycle. There is a cycle to abuse. And any abuse expert will tell you this. There is a cycle to an abusive relationship where there will be a buildup of tension, whether the tension is in the relationship or external to the relationship. Tension will build, and then there will be an explosion of some kind. The individual will start yelling, screaming, become physically violent, and then there will be an apology phase. Oh, I'm so sorry, this will never happen again. Here, let me do things for you. I'll make you dinner. I'll do this for you. I'll do that for you, blah, 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 blah. And they're all sweetness and light for a while. And then the tension will build again. There'll be another explosion. Then there'll be sweetness and light. And it feels like you're on a roller coaster. There's an unpredictability to it. You never know what you're coming home to. So that unpredictability serves as an intimidation factor. You never know what you're coming home to. It's a part of the control. So again, if you see that, if you start to see that, big, big, big red flag. Actually, all these red flags are big. Number 7, it's always your fault. I've had guys tell me that, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one around to hear it, it's my fault. And that's pretty much what it is. When it's your fault, you're to blame and you need to apologize and grovel and everything. And if it's her fault, you're even more to blame because it's probably your fault that it's her fault. Anything that happens, anything that goes wrong, it's always, always, always your fault. You're always to blame. It doesn't matter who did it. It's always your fault. She will blame you for anything, everything, and most everything in between. So if you see that, if everything is always externalized, and it's a word I use a lot, externalized, everything has an external cause. It's never them. If that's the problem, big red flag, because again, one day that's going to be directed at you. Breakup panic is number 8. The loser panics at the idea of breaking up unless it's totally their idea, and then they drop you like a hot potato. If you talk about breaking up, taking a break, having a little space, taking some time, they will absolutely go bonkers, because remember, a lot of times fear of abandonment is a major part of abusive relationships. So they're going to start feeling abandoned and they're going to pull out all the stops. I'm going to kill myself. I'm just going to go and do this. I'm going to go and do drugs. I'm going to go and cheat. I'm going to go with this ex-boyfriend who used to beat me up. I'm going to blah, 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 blah. They're going to pull out all the stops to get you to come back to the plantation and stay there. If you see this, it's blatant manipulation. They want you to come back, and they're going to say and do anything necessary to make that happen. Massive, again, massive red flag. Number 9, no outside interests. The loser's going to encourage you to drop all your hobbies, your interests. If you have that classic car in the garage that you've been wanting to restore, they're going to want you to sell it. If you go to the gun range with your buddies to, burn off some ammunition, shoot the breeze, have some fun, she doesn't want you to do that. Oh, spend some time here with me. She's going to slowly but surely, and again, this is part of that control mechanism where everything has to be centered on her, not on you. A healthy relationship, your partner's going to encourage your interests and want you to be happy. In a controlling abusive relationship, she's going to want everything focused on her, and your outside interests are competition, and they have to go. So if she isn't discouraging you from doing anything and completely focusing everything on her, or most everything on her, again, massive red flag. Number 10, paranoid control. They are going to check on everything you do. They're going to want to see your Facebook page. They're going to want your passwords for everything. You don't necessarily get theirs, but they're going to want your passwords for everything. They're going to want the GPS for your phone. I know a guy that, wife checks the GPS on the phone. And, if you have an Android phone, we all know Google Apps sometimes glitches and, you go through a tunnel on the turnpike or something like that. And, the GPS goes out and this person's wife goes bonkers about that. Not good. Not good. Very abusive. Guy comes home and gets the interrogation. Where were you? Where did you stop? Where did you go? Did you get off an exit or are you cheating on me? Blah, 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 blah. That's abusive. Red flag. Massive red flag. If they're always checking on where you go, where you're talking to, who were you talking to? No guys that have been yelled and screamed and interrogated because they were talking to a female cousin. Craziness. Craziness. If you see that, massive red flag, might want to get out of the relationship, might want to consider dropping that person. Public embarrassment. I've seen this one too. If you're ever in a store and see a woman kind of castigating a guy, This is what we're talking about. Loser will lash out at you, call you names, say cruel and embarrassing things to you in front of people. When in public, you will quickly learn that any opinion you express might cause an attack against you and embarrass you in public. The whole thing is they're in control. You are not. Shut up and do what you're told. That's all it's all about. Pure power move on their part. So, again, massive red flag. Number 12, it's never enough. You're never good enough. You don't say I love you enough. You don't stand close enough. There's not enough sex. There's too much sex. There's this, there's that. There's not enough anything. You're never good enough. You're always being asked to do more, try more, work harder, try harder, no matter what you do. It's the you never spend enough time with me. You're not making enough money. So you work more and then you're not spending enough time with me. Why are you working so much? You know, it's a double bind. You're never doing enough, and even when you try your best and your hardest and you try twice as hard, it's never enough. Number 13, entitlement. They have a tremendous sense of entitlement. They're perfectly right to do whatever they want or whatever they desire. And this is a little extreme, but it does happen. They have the right to run people off the road. They have the right to destroy things. They can have a temper tantrum. And if you see them do this to other people, once again, rest assured that one day they will do this to you. They feel that they're entitled to punish you any way they desire to. If your friends and family dislike them, and you know, as the relationship continues, your friends and family will see that what the loser's doing to you, and they'll notice the change in you because you're being abused. And then, of course, you know, goes back to the separation red flag. You know, the loser is going to tell you they're jealous of this special relationship you have and how this relationship is so much different than all the other relationships. So, you know, they're gonna become angry at you, start yelling and screaming at you, and it's going to get abusive to the point where you're really going to stop talking to your family and friends because they're going to have an angry reaction anytime you do. And then you're going to get interrogated. Well, what'd they say about me? Or they're going to do things like, oh, when we were at your parents' house, your mother said something to me, or your sister looked at me funny, or, you know, they're going to do things like that to try to get you to separate from your family just to keep the peace. And again, this is control and manipulation 101, massive red flag. Number 15, bad stories. People will let you know about their personality by the stories they tell themselves. We all have a narrative about themselves, and we all have little stories that we tell about ourselves. Little funny things that maybe we did in our youth, or, you know, things that happened to us at our workplaces. It's how we kind of weave our little narrative about ourselves. Now, kind of Dr. Carver puts it, it's the old story about giving a person enough rope and they'll hang themselves. Now, when the loser or the person tells them stories about how they beat people up, or they've been arrested, or they did hard drugs, or, you know, how they got a boyfriend arrested for, you know, and they lied about abuse to the cops to get the guy arrested, and they had ha 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 funny, leave, go away. You know, the cliche is that, you know, if you're meeting a woman for the first time and she talks about how all of her boyfriends have been abusive, 6 months later, she's going to be talking about the next guy telling him that you were abusive. So, you know, be very, very careful with that kind of stuff. Number 6, as I mentioned earlier, the waitress test. One way to know how a person is going to be with you is how do they treat someone who serves them? How do they treat a waitress? If they are polite and kind to someone who is waiting on them, they're probably going to be polite and kind to you. If they are mean, cruel, and nasty to someone who is serving them, they're probably one day going to be mean, cruel, and nasty to you. Once again, best predictor of future behavior, past behavior. Same thing with the stories. 7, reputation. They may have a couple different reputations. They may have some friends that think they're a great person. A lot of times losers are superficially very charming. A lot of times they can put on a facade that they're really together and they have it and they're doing really great and they're awesome. And when you might first meet them, you think, wow, this is a really cool person. This is someone I want to get close to. But as you start to get close to them, you start to see these red flags that we're talking about here today. So as you get into seeing kind of what kind of reputation they have, you get to hear two different kind of reputations. You get to hear the people that are still kind of in that facade kind of thing, that they only know them superficially and they think, oh yeah, this person's awesome, they're great, they really seem to have it together. And then you get people that maybe know them a little bit better or have known them for a long time or maybe even are related to them and say, oh, she's crazy, she's as crazy as a bag of cats. It bad. You start to hear a lot of bad stuff. When you start to hear a lot of bad stuff, if a lot of people have a bad impression about someone, there's usually a reason for it. So keep that in mind. Log that in the back of your noggin and think accordingly. Number 18, walking on eggshells. As the relationship with the loser continues, you'll gradually be exposed to verbal intimidation, temper tantrums, lengthy interrogations about trivial matters, as we discussed earlier, violence and threats directed at others witnessed by you, paranoid preoccupation with your activities, a variety of put-downs about your character, and you're eventually going to find yourself walking on eggshells in their presence. You're not going to bring things up. You're going to be fearful to mention who you spoke to, who you talked to, who you bumped into, fearful to mention that you anything. You're going to be fearful because you don't want that stuff hitting you. Instead of experiencing warmth and comfort of love, you're going to be on the edge, tense, fearful. Healthy relationships should be comforting. Healthy relationships should be loving. Abusive relationships cause tension, cause fear, cause people to not want to come home. If you're in that kind of a relationship or it's starting to get that way, you might want to consider leaving that relationship. Number 19, discounted feelings and opinions. The loser is self-involved. They're all about them. They're not about you. You're just an accessory in their lives. If you might be an ATM, you're a provider. You're a person who brings home money that they can use to buy things, or you're a utility. You make them look good or you make them look better because maybe you have some status in the world. But as the relationship continues, you start to question what you're seeing in their behavior, and you're going to be told that your feelings and opinions don't make sense. In other words, they're just going to gaslight you. They're going to make you seem like you're the one who's crazy, that you have the problem. Again, it's your fault. If they're acting out, if they're yelling and screaming, it's because it's your fault. You did something. You didn't listen. You didn't do something. You didn't act in the right way. And if you would just do what they said, everything would be fine. They make you feel like you're crazy. And again, gaslighting, that's their self-defense mechanism. When you're just going over everything, you're running a checklist through your head to make sure you don't do anything to trigger them. You don't do anything to trigger retaliation for the slightest anything. They're making you feel crazy. Another thing I kind of forgot to mention in one of those, they will destroy things in your home. They will destroy objects. If they come home and in the middle of an argument, they trash all the dishes in your house, or they throw all the things off a shelf, or, they just start knocking stuff all over the place. Massive red flags. All of these are massive red flags. Now, if you noticed through the progression of these things from 1 to 20, these are the progression of how things go as you get deeper and deeper and deeper into a relationship. The more and more you get into those steps, those increments, the more and more control a person has over you in a relationship. As the relationship evolves or devolves, as the case may be, and the more and more you tolerate these, because these only go on because you tolerate them, you overlook them, you choose to stay in this and take these things, they feel emboldened to take more and more of these steps until they have total control over you. The best way to avoid these things is to not get into the relationship. When you see these red flags, you bail, you stop, you cease, you get out, you stop dating them. If they threaten to kill themselves, call the police, call 911, send an ambulance to their house to get them checked and maybe even put into a psychiatric hospital if that's what they need. But you don't go there yourself. It's manipulation, it's craziness, and you don't need that in your life. It leads to the abusive kind of abusive relationship that I talked about in the last video. You don't deserve this. You deserve better than this. You don't deserve to be abused. You don't deserve to be manipulated. You don't deserve to be controlled. You don't deserve to be isolated from your family and friends. You deserve better. The best way to avoid this is to recognize the fact that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. If they're doing this now, they're going to do it again, and they're going to do it to you. Get out before it starts. If you do that, you can move on. Now, one more thing before we kind of close out here. I've talked to a lot of men who are in bad relationships, bad marriages, and when they get out, they can reflect. And one of the things that they tend to reflect on is that they didn't feel that they would ever find anyone else if they got out of the relationship. They thought that this was the only one person that they could have, that once they got out of this relationship, that was it, that it was over, goodbye, sayonara, they were stuck. And they actually feared being alone more than they did being in the relationship. It is better to be alone than being in a relationship like that. And as the saying goes, there are plenty of fish in the sea. If you really want to be in a relationship, there are other people to get in a relationship with that won't treat you like that. There are always other people out there. And, you know, if you have a problem being alone, then maybe that's something you need to work on in you. Because like I said, it's a heck of a lot better being alone than it is being in an abusive relationship. So please recognize the red flags. Don't overlook them. Don't think that you can love them enough that they're going to get better. You can't love a person out of this kind of stuff. You can't. You just can't. Another way to kind of, another one, to avoid this kind of stuff. Long courtships. Do not cohabitate. Don't give them a house key. Don't get married. Don't do any of those things. Now, if you want to get married and cohabitate at some point, that's your choice. But if you want to do that at some point, wait a very, very, very long time. As I said, a lot of these losers are superficially charming. At first, they seem like they have it all together, even though they don't. But they can't hold up that facade forever. Eventually, their true nature shows itself. Eventually, you start to see the red flags. And eventually, you see enough of them to recognize that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And you'll be able to know to get out of that relationship. So don't go jumping into like long-term relationships. Don't go jumping into cohabitation. Don't go jumping into getting married. Take some time to really get to know someone before you take any kind of steps like that, if that's the choice you want to make. So take these things into consideration, guys. Be very, very careful about how you proceed and learn these red flags and learn them well, because these things will save you a whole lot of time, trouble, money, and potentially even jail time, because it does happen. So to wrap up completely, if you are feeling suicidal, please don't take that step. Call the suicide prevention hotline that'll be down in the description below. Suicide is a long-term solution to a short-term problem. Most of the time, everything does get better. So hit the subscribe, hit the like, hit the bell for future videos, and I will be back with future videos in the future. Have a great day.